We are on the bottom of Gimel Amud Aleph. And last thing we spoke about was this distinction made that the Gemara told us that when it comes to a woman riding a donkey, it does not use the word merkav. It does not use the word riding because it's an indelicate term. However, the Gemara is going to point out that there are a number of places where the Torah actually does use that term. So it says the Gemara. So we're on the last paragraph on 3a3. V'isha luksiv ba merkav. Is it true that it doesn't say riding when it comes to a woman? Is that true? V'aksiv atakam Rivka v'narosav der kavna aligamalim. When Rivka, Yitzchak's wife, is traveling to meet up with Yitzchak, it says that Rivka came with her maidens and they rode upon the camels. So the Gemara says no. There it's different. 3a4. Hasam mishum biasusa digmalim orchahi. There, when it comes to riding a camel, if you ever did one of those like really expensive, overpriced camel rides in Israel, you'll know it's an absolutely terrifying thing to be up there on a camel, and therefore, of course, there it is the norm for. Whereas when riding a horse or something else, it wasn't only that the Torah doesn't speak that way, but typically women would actually put both their feet in one direction. They wouldn't actually, sit with their, sit in the opposite direction, but ride the camel, but ride the horse. But when it comes to a camel, because it's absolutely terrifying, it is the norm, and therefore, of course, it's okay to say that because that's the way that both men and women would ride on a camel, and therefore, Archi, it's normal. Okay, the Gemara says from another place, Vaksiv, it says about Moshe and Zipporah and her children. Vigach Moshe's ishtav as banav yarkivim al chamor. When Moshe is traveling back to Mitzrayim, it says he took his wife and his sons, and they rode on a donkey. Right, so. The donkey is not a scary animal. It's not scary at all. So Gemara says, Hasam Gimel Mabez Mishum Banav Orchahi. There, it's true, it says his wife, but it also says his sons. And therefore, it mentions riding, but because of the sons who rode in that fashion, it therefore used that one verb to describe all of their, the way that all of them traveled. Okay, Vaksiv.
Why are we going into this again?
Why would we use Yom or instead of?
Right, meaning this is we're still, yeah. I mean, this is right. The last thing we saw yesterday was the fact that Gemara said that when it comes to women, it never says riding on an animal, and therefore the Gemara says, "What are you talking about?" It does.
What is that?
The context was how delicate we want to be with our speech. Yeah. Vaksiv, the Gemara says, "Vayahu he recheves lechamar." This is about Avigail. Avigail was ultimately a spouse of David HaMelech, but initially she was not, and David was going to go ahead and was offended by Naval, her husband, and was potentially going to harm Naval, and she wanted to go save her husband. And it says that she came riding on the donkey. Okay, so there again, it's just her, right? And it's a donkey. So again, you see recheves lechamar. Gemara says hasam mishum biasusa delelia. There it's because it was done at night. She was riding at night. Archahi, therefore it's normal. Vibai same. Alternatively, mishum biasusa delelia leika. It's not because it was night and she was scared. Rather, mishum biasusa davidika. She was about to encounter David at this point, a warrior, royalty, and therefore she was scared, and therefore that caused her to ride in that fashion. By saying David Lamileka wasn't because of David, rather she was riding down a mountain, and therefore, granted, on a regular flat terrain, it wouldn't be the norm, but in this fashion, in this specific scenario, it would be normal. Okay, but the bottom line is the Gemara is saying these are exceptional cases. Okay, now the Gemara asks something which I think you, Max, asked yesterday, and that is Varaisa mi lo ksiv tameh. What are you talking about? Throughout the Torah, does it really not say tameh? There are many times where the Torah does say tameh. The word tameh is found in the Torah often. So where it says like this: when the coarse expression and the more refined expression are equal, meaning they're the same length, then mishtai b'lashon nikia. Then the Torah will always use the more refined expression. Wherever the more refined expression is longer, mishtai b'lashon getzara. Then the Torah is going to use the more concise expression. Now, wait a second. All those examples we used yesterday, the Torah is actually much longer to use the more refined expression. So what Rashi explains, and we're not going to go into the details, but the Rishonim actually go into all the details explaining how each of those cases are the exceptions in order to teach us this rule. In other words, the Torah wants to teach us that how important it is to use refined language, and therefore in a number of places, the Torah will go ahead and use even longer language, which is more refined, as opposed to the less refined language, to show you how important it is to use refined language. And each of those examples are teaching us different things. For example, I'm not going to go into all of them, but like in one place, for example, what was the first example? And remember? I'd be very impressed. Okay, the first example was Noach and the Teva, right? So there it's about animals. Maybe by animals would be one thing, but maybe by people wouldn't, it goes like all these types of things. So showing that by each category, it'd be important to go through, it'd be important to use more refined language. So that's all the examples we saw yesterday. But beyond those necessary examples, in general, the general rule is like this. If it's equal, if it's the exact same length of words, then we would use the more refined language over the less refined language. If it's longer to say the more refined language, then we use the less refined language because it's more concise. As we're about to see, teaching in a concise fashion is very important. You with me? Right? So the Gemara says, yeah, of course we do use the word tameh, but that's because those are places where it's going to be more concise to say tameh. That what? Lo yishna adam l'talmido. The person should always teach his students in a concise manner. Okay, ask the Gemara, wait, is that principle true? That always when it's shorter, then we go through the shorter fashion. Is it true when the two are equal? Then we use the more refined language. Yet, we have a scenario where you have two words, rocheves, which is riding, yosheves, which are sitting. Sitting is more refined, and yet the Torah says rocheves. The Gemara says rocheves ksiv. If you actually look in the Torah, the vav is missing from rocheves, and therefore rocheves, which is riding, is actually shorter, even though it's the less refined term. It's going to use that less refined term because it's actually written in a shorter fashion. Okay, now the Gemara is going to have a number of examples of people who spoke in a refined fashion, continuing on this theme. Hanu Trei Talmidei Hava Yasvi coming to Rav. There are two students sitting in front of Rav. Chad Amar, one of them said, Shavisinan Ahai Shmaita Kadavar Acher Maskinan. They finished learning and they were wiped out. Okay, it was they finished learning Erevin, right? They were wiped out. And one student said, the study made us like tired like a pig. V'chad Amar Shavisinhu Ahai Shmaita Ki Gedi Maskit Misaknan. And the other one said, it made us tired like a kid, like a goat. And Rav did not speak to the first one. The fact that he said, use the word pig, no longer spoke to him. Wow, okay? There were two students who were sitting in front of Hill. And one of them was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And there are others say that this story took place a few generations later, sitting in front of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, and one of them was Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, one way or another. Right, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is generations before Rabbi Yochanan the Amora. One way or another, Chadam, or one student said, "Mipnei ma botzim mitara." Okay, so actually we saw this halacha all the way back in Maseches Shabbos, and that is that you harvest grapes with utensils that are in a state of tara. We're not going to get into why right now, but the Mishnah points out that when you harvest things, you have to use when you harvest grapes, you have to harvest the grapes with utensils that are tahar. Ve'ein moskin bitara. But when you harvest olives, the utensils not have to be pure. Okay, the Gemara elsewhere addresses why, but this is the question they asked. Okay, so one of them asked, why when you harvest grapes you have to use utensils that are pure, and why when you harvest olives you have to use do you not need utensils that are pure? Okay, so the Chadam one said, why must you harvest grapes with utensils that are pure? And you're allowed to harvest olives with utensils that are tameh, right, impure. Amar, and the teacher, whether it was Hillel or whether it was Rebbe, said, Muftachni bazeh, I'm certain about the first one, the one who used the word not pure, Shemora ha Rabbi Yisrael, that he is going to ultimately be a posek, and it was a short time passage, or Rabbi Yisrael, that either Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai or Rabbi Yochanan ultimately became a posek, right? So you see again the value of this refined language, okay? Now we have another story. Hanu Tlasik Hani, there were three Kohanim, Chad Amar Luhu, and they were dividing lechem apanim, right? Every week, the lechem apanim, the bread that was used on the shulchan, was divided amongst the Kohanim who were serving, and they were now like comparing, now they didn't use like a scale or something to measure. It was broken up, and sometimes they would get, not everyone always would get the same exact portion. They were the Kohanim were like chatting, in the back room. They were chatting about the sizes of bread they got. One of them said, I got the size of a bean, okay, meaning very small. Obviously, he was not so happy. One of them said, I got a size of an olive, okay. And one said, I got the size of a lizard's tail. Now, a lizard is a not pure animal, right? And he was saying, I got the size of a lizard's tail. They heard this, right? And they said, whoa, who speaks like that? A Kohen speaks like that? They looked into it, and they found out that he was actually not supposed to be a Kohen. He was genealogically flawed. He was not supposed to be a Kohen, right? Big stuff. I asked the Gemara, wait a second, what's nan? We learned in the Mishnah, Ein Bokim and Mizbeach L'mala, that if someone serves in the Mizbeach, if someone serves in the Beis HaMikdash, then we actually assume that the Mishnah talks about when a person gets married, you're supposed to do some level of research to make sure that that there are no psulim, that like they're not like a relative, right? You have to make sure you're not marrying a relative, etc. So you do certain checks, and one of the things you want to make sure is that no one is like invalid, no one's a mamzer, things like that. But if you start doing research, you're marrying a Kohen, you start doing research and you find out, oh, this family served in the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, they did research because they would not allow them to serve in the Beis HaMikdash without doing thorough research. So when it says, how could it be that this person's puzzle if we normally assume that someone who served in the Beis HaMikdash is 100% fine? So the Gemara says two answers. Lo t'em Hashem es psul. One is that it wasn't a disqualifying genealogical flaw, ela ema shachatz psul, that it was disqualifying haughtiness. The way Rashi understands this is that it wasn't that he had genealogically, it wasn't that he came from a family that was invalid, but rather the fact that he acted arrogantly towards the avoda in the Beis HaMikdash, that is actually a flaw. If a person like disqualifies or denigrates the avoda in the Beis HaMikdash, then you are invalid as a Kohen. If a Kohen were to come up and say, this is silly, like the lighting the menorah is silly, you can't be a Kohen. You can't serve at the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, so that's what it means. That's one possibility. Alternatively, that the person himself compromised himself. In other words, when the Gemara said the Mishnah in Kedushin, right? The Mishnah in Menachos, thank you. No, Kedushin, no? 22. Yeah, Kedushin. Could be mentioned Menachos as well. Okay, the Mishnah Kedushin says that that person that we trust that he is a valid Kohen means it's a chazaka. It means that if you're doing research, you're about to marry a Kohen, you say, I'm going to do research, and you find out that he's served in the Beis HaMikdash, okay, don't do more research, you could make this assumption. But if there's something comes up, if there's some reason that comes up that makes a massive question about this, then you should do more research, and that's what we're saying over here. Yes, it's true, we can normally assume that, but if someone says something like a lizard's tail, whoa, then you have to do research, right? Again, so the Torah is elevating the point, not saying, foul language, etc., but really elevating and refining our language. Okay, another story. Hahu Aramad Havasalik. There was an Aramean, a non-Jew, who would go up, v'achal Pesachim Yerushalayim, and eat Karban Pesach in Yerushalayim. Okay? In other words, he wanted to, this was just like for like a person who was doing something wrong, a non-Jew, and he saw there's like a huge, you look at, there's like a historic record from the Romans during this time, like they described, like, it was a pretty awesome event when they came to Yerushalayim for the Karban Pesach. Everyone went mass in Yerushalayim, and it was like, it was epic. It was like really special things. So this non-Jew said, I want to be a part of it, right? Sounds like an awesome thing. I want to be a part of it. So he would go, and he would pretend he was Jewish. How are they going to tell the difference, right? He'd pretend he's Jewish, and he would have the Karban Pesach. He would say, oh, can I join your Karban Pesach? Sure. And he would participate, which is an Isser. It's Isser to give from the Karban Pesach to a non-Jew. Amar, he once said to his neighbor, Rav Yehuda ben Beseira, who was a great sage, Ksiv kol ben neicher lo yochel bo. Although it's written, any stranger may not eat it. Kol ora lo yochel bo. And the pasuk says that anyone who doesn't have a bris milah is not allowed to eat it. Vanaha kachil shufrei shufrei. Nonetheless, I get the best of the Karban Pesach. They give me like pick whatever you think is the best part of the meat. He says, I get it. So he was like boasting. He was like mocking the Jews. Okay. Amar le. So Yehuda ben Beseira said, Amar le Yehuda ben Beseira, Mika safale ma'alya. Did they give you from the fat tail? You said you get the best? Did they give you the fat tail? That is the best. So Amar Leilo, he says, no. So Rav Yehuda ben Beseira says, okay, if you really think you get the best, when you go there, tell them you want from the tail. Tell them you want from the tail. Okay, so when he went up, he told them, feed me from the fat tail. They said, what are you talking about? The fat tail is not one of the things we eat. That's one of the things that stays on the Mizbeach. Smooth, right? Who told you to ask for this fat tail? Rav Yehuda ben Beseira. Rav Yehuda ben Beseira told us this. They started talking among themselves. Said, what's going on over here, right? Obviously, this doesn't make any sense. Rav Yehuda ben Beseira is like the leading scholar. Moshe Feinstein said, go eat something which is like trait. Like, obviously, like there's something going on over here, right? So, Badku Basrei, they ended up doing searches. Vashchlu Darmahi, they found out he was non-Jewish, and they killed him. Why they killed him is a big discussion. Like, is he really Chai Misa? Minchas Chinuch, Sefer Chinuch, one of them say that the reason they killed him was because the fact that for a non-Jew to steal is actually a capital crime, and he was really stealing. This is a form of stealing. And by the way, there's bunch of different answers. Fine. Shalchul later Rav Yehuda ben Beseira, they sent a message to Rav Yehuda ben Beseira. Shalom lach Rav Yehuda ben Beseira. Peace to you, Rav Yehuda ben Beseira. Da'at ben Tzivin, you live in Tzivin. Umitu dasach prusa b'Yerushalayim, and your net is spread all the way to Yerushalayim. In other words, this is incredible. You live all the way there, but you're able to go ahead and so to speak catch people far away. The first mass like, wait, why didn't he go to Yerushalayim himself? Everyone goes to Karban Pesach, right? So there are a bunch of different answers. Some say maybe he was very old at the time. Some say, that the actually, interestingly, the chiyuv for Karban Pesach is only if you own land. The Gemara is going to teach us later on if you own land. Rav Yehuda ben Beseira was a poor individual. He didn't actually own any lands, and therefore the technical obligation wouldn't apply. Okay, one way or another, he wasn't there, but he was cleverly able to trap this person and ensure that he would not eat from the Karban Pesach. Okay, now we have another story of restraining speech. Rav Kahana Chalash, Rav Kahana was sick. Shadru Rabbanan Rabbi Yeshua Bereda of Edi. The rabbi sent Rabbi Yeshua, the son of Rav Edi, to find out how he's doing. Amr Le Zil B'dog Ma'idinei. Go find out how Rav Kahana is. Aslash Nach Nafshe. By the time Yeshua got there, Rav Kahana passed away. Kar Levushe. He tore his garments in mourning. Okay, so we have a halacha that if like the Gadol Adar dies, then we're really supposed to do kriya. Okay, how that applies practically nowadays, long discussion, but not for today. But what he did is he tore his beged, and then keep in mind they wore like robes back then. They wore like a big cloak back then. So he tore his cloak, and then he turned it behind him so that when he encounters the rabbis, they wouldn't see the tear right away and be like overwhelmed because it would be a big deal, it would be a shock for them. So, but he came back crying. Amrulay, they said, they asked him, Nach nafshe, did he die? Amrlahu, ana lo kamine. He says, I didn't say anything. He says, I'm not saying those words. Umotzi, why he quoted a pasuk in Mishlei, Umotzi diba, who's chsil, a person who utters an evil report is a fool. Okay, so he says, I don't even want to tell, even though they sent him to find out if he was alive or not. But when he comes back, he doesn't want to say it explicitly. He does something which is indicative to them that he died, but he doesn't want to say so explicitly. He doesn't want to say, and people, and we'll talk about this practically in a moment, but basically doesn't want to inform, of the passing of this sage. Okay, another story of this nature. Yochanan Chakuka Nafik Likar Yochanan Chakuka went to the village to inspect crops. Kiyasa Amrle, when he came back, they asked him, Chitin Nasu Yafos, did the wheat crop, which is the most important crop, did it turn out well? Amrlehem Sa'orim Nasus Yafos. He said the barley came out well. Right? So in other words, he doesn't want to say that the wheat did not turn out well. So he says, oh, this is good, right? With the implication, Amrle, they said to him, go and give your news to the horses and donkeys. Because the barley and the straw are for horses and for speedy mounts. In other words, barley, nowadays we eat barley. Back in the day, people will not eat barley. So basically it's like, this is not this is not the way to answer it. Although he's trying to speak in a refined fashion, like that is information which is completely irrelevant to all of us because this is animal food. So where it says, my havla memra. So what should he have said? He didn't want to say something inappropriate and you're yelling at him for saying animal food. So where it says, Ishtaka nasu chitin yafas. What he should have said is either last year the wheat crop turned out well, so you're still talking about human needs, okay? Inami adashim nasu yafos, or he could have said the lentils turned out well, which is also human food. Yeah.
Indirect with the way they're speaking. I don't see how this is a nicer way of talking. We're just not.
So here we see, no, this is, so.
Yes or no would suffice.
Correct. Yes.
Yesterday was a good day.
Yeah, yeah.
It was fine.
No, so what the Gemara is telling us is that you and I do not speak in a refined enough fashion. The Gemara is saying that no, that's not enough. To say something negative, we really, and this is what the Gemara is saying is that it's not only if I say like tameh or tar. The point is if I say things which have a negative connotation, which not even negative in the sense that it's like dirty or unrefined, right? The Gemara over here just took two big leaps. One, it's only where it's unrefined. I shouldn't say like negative words that have a negative, unrefined connotation. Now the Gemara is saying even to share tragic news, that is not good. That shouldn't exit your mouth, and nor should you share like any tragic news or anything which is bad. Though our mouth, we should, as best as possible, avoid saying such things. And then we're saying, saying no or saying yes would be sharing in a more direct fashion, and as best as we can, we should avoid that. Okay, one more story. Rav Baruch Lud Rav Chia, Rav the son of Rav Chia's brother, Ubar Achte, and the son of Rav Chia's sister. Kisalik Lahasam, when Rav went there to Eretz Yisrael, Amrulei Aibu Kayam. Rav Chia asked him. Okay, so he travels, and in other words, keep in mind, back in the day, information didn't travel so easily. So when a person travels from Israel, they say, oh, what's going on with my family back in Bavel, right? So he comes and they say, Rav Chia asked him, is Ivu, okay, who's his relative, says, is he alive? Amrulei Ima Kayemas. Rav said to him in back, he said, is the mother alive? Right? He didn't answer him. He said, is mother alive? He said, Amalei Ima Kayamas. Then Rav Chia said, is Ima alive? Amalei Ivu Kayam. He said, is Ivu alive? In other words, he's kind of playing like who's on first type of thing. But basically, it's like going back and forth. Like he's not answering, he's just asking questions. Amalei L'Shamei. Rav understood this, and he turned to his. He understood that both his brother Ivu and his sister Ima had passed away. Her name was Ima. So Rav Chia said to his attendants, Chalotzli min alei, take off my shoes. Okay, v'holich kalei acharai leves merchatz. Take my clothing after me to the bathhouse. Okay, so what's going on over here? So keep in mind, he's hearing this news. You know what? We're gonna have to let's stop over here. We'll have to unpack the story in a little bit more detail. But some very important halachos about sharing information about a passing. Are you supposed to share this information? Right? When people pass away, do you share this information? So let me just say one thing briefly, and then we'll I think we still have a minute. But basically, the Shulchan Aruch does pass, and you don't share news of a passing. The Mefarshim point out that what are you talking about? People want to know this information. They want to say Shiva. They want to say Kaddish. They want to say Shiva. So generally speaking, we do. But the Gemara over here we'll talk about some exceptional cases, and that's what this Gemara is going to talk about. We'll get there tomorrow. Okay. Have a great day.